everyone. Welcome to the Brown Paint Podcast. My name is Aarti Vijay and this is Simrath Pannu or Simi. Simi is a integrative and functional medicine health practitioner, a Toronto-based yoga instructor and trauma scholar. Her work strikes a balance between holistic nutrition and emotional trauma healing. Working one-on-one with clients, her mission is to educate others to become their own healer as well, to step into their highest, most brightest self. Thank you so much for being here today, Simi. I'm so excited because you have such a wealth of knowledge on this topic. We are going to be talking about cultural appropriation today. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. Can you just give us a brief synopsis of your story, specifically about your background as a scholar and in academics, and then how you integrated into integrative health?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me here, Adia. You know, I love talking to you, and it's, even though I'm more towards the holistic side now, it's always nice to jump back to this topic, which is such a big part of my life as well. But essentially, I'm an integrative health practitioner. I incorporate a lot of East-West philosophies. Wait, did you ask me to explain myself?
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
go ahead.
Okay.
By the way, I can edit bits out.
Oh, thank
God.
God.
Don't stress.
I just realized, I was like, hey, okay.
No.
Okay,
Yeah, I can edit that out. It's fine.
Okay. I am an integrative health practitioner. A lot of my work strikes a balance between really combining East-West philosophies together. So you're looking at science-based protocols. You're looking at a lot of ancestral medicine, so Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, and also with the clients that I work with, if they're Indigenous or African, even their modalities as well being incorporated. And trauma healing is such a big part, because I don't believe you can heal the whole person without actually healing the emotional body as well as the mental body and the physical body all together. It's total healing. But tapping into my academic side, because for most of my life, I was an academic. I was running conferences, writing papers, and my research really focused on comparative Orientalism. And Orientalism is the study of the East and West. But specifically what I looked at is this idea of the East being a lost part of the Western identity. And naturally, it leads into colonial theory. Why was there such a resistance? Why was there this idea of the East as being feminine, material, uncontrollable? Why was the West so masculine? Why did it choose to be so restrictive? So, in so many ways, pale compared to that vibrancy that we get in the East. But at the same time, why was this admiration for the East? Why were things being taken from the East and put into the same houses of people that were pro-colonialism? And so that was pretty much what my research was looking at. And it always led back to trauma. And so we can talk about even like my spiritual journey, because it taps into a lot of how I see trauma, because I've always seen it in a bit of a different way that's a little bit more, I want to say, controversial. And that just might be because people don't look at it the way that I do. But for me, when I was 11, I grew up in Brampton, which is outside of Toronto. So no one knows Brampton, but everybody knows Toronto.
Yes, yeah, right? I was going to say.
And in the 80s and 90s in Brampton, a lot of Sikhs and Hindus were immigrating. But originally, Brampton was predominantly white Canadian or Italian. And so naturally, when you have these big diasporas coming together, and when immigrant communities build, they tend to build within their own collective, naturally, because you like, who else will speak your language, right? Who else is going to have your spices or your music, right? So there was a lot of racism growing up in Brampton. And I remember when I was 11, we were outside of his recess, and one of the girls who was white, she spat on me. And that's not to take away from the fact that, she laughed at it, but there were brown people also laughing at it as well. And I think that's a very important thing to bring up as well. And I remember I'm 11 years old, but I knew it was a very bad thing what she did, despite her trying to make light of it.
Right.
Yeah. So I went home and I was just very confused. I remember feeling like shame, frustration, anger, confusion, like all these feelings.
Mm.
And I go home and my father is bragging about this book. This is a huge self-development guy. And he's like, everybody should read this. It's Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. He's talking about this book like it's the greatest thing ever. And I'm this like nerdy kid. So I'm like, okay, well, I want to be like you. So I'm going to read this. And I don't know, Adi, have you read Think and
No, I
Grow Rich?
haven't.
Have you
No,
heard of Napoleon Hill?
no, I
Okay, like
haven't.
everybody should read him. He will change
Okay,
your life.
I'm
Yeah.
writing that down for sure.
Yeah, he's like the OG self-development guy. Like,
Oh,
yeah, he wrote in what, like the early 1920s.
oh,
And
whoa.
yeah, so
Oh
he's that
my
guy.
gosh.
Yeah, so I read the
Okay,
book, and it's a sort of like a spiritual self-development meets business book.
right.
And I got all of the spiritual stuff. I got none of the business stuff, which like sucks. But as a kid reading it, the biggest thing I got from that was that you are the master of your fate. You are the captain of your soul. You control everything. The world is very much your plane to design.
Wow.
Yeah. And I
Isn't
don't
that
know,
a powerful thing to hear as a child?
I mean, to
Best
read
thing
it.
you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, again, like I'm 11 years old, so I don't fully understand it, but it sticks for sure.
Mm.
And so I start to like my experience with that girl completely shifts as well because it stays with me for quite some time. And what I realized was that the only thing I didn't want to be was that. And
Mm.
that required me as a South Asian to also look at my own stereotypes within my community,
Mm.
my
Okay.
own racism within my community.
Mm.
And so I realized that, well, it's racism is not a colored thing, it's a human thing, if anything, to be honest.
Gotcha. Mm.
Hence why you have caste systems and so forth. So it's really
Mm.
informed a lot of my personal academic theories.
Mm.
And the holistic side of stuff just really comes from this interest on, there's nothing greater than being able to control your body and your health in particular, because
Yes.
food, you are what you eat. And so food is
Yes.
such a powerful part where if you're nourishing the mind with self-development, how
Yes.
awesome is it that you get to become optimal based on the stuff that you choose to eat?
Yeah.
And there's so much energy in food. I mean, indigenous cultures talk about this all the
Yeah.
time, this idea of taking on the spirit of the food that you eat. I
Mm.
think even Ayurvedic medicine does it too. And so it was just natural that those two would come together as my full-on
Wow.
passion. Yeah.
I love that. I want to ask a question actually back to what you said about
Hmm.
how racism is just a human thing. Does that stem from tribalism, in your opinion? Like
That's a
tribes and their,
Mhm.
territorialness?
I think so. I think for sure, if we're looking at tribes and this idea of self-preservation as
Yeah.
a small knit community, for
Yeah.
sure, right?
Mm.
Because you only see the world from what you know. You only see the world
Yeah.
from what you understand emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, right? So for
Mm.
sure, I would agree with that.
So you know how they say this quote, racism is a learnt behavior and we can unlearn it. Do you believe
Mhm.
that if we say that racism is based off of tribalism and tribes seeing people that they've never seen before and being like, oh, they're not one of us, we need to protect our tribe. So do you believe that in that case, racism isn't a learnt experience and it's actually just a part of human nature and what keeps us alive, or the
Yeah, I
early
think
humans alive?
yeah, I think it could be learned for sure.
Okay.
I think it's also a stored experience.
Oh, okay. That's really
Mhm.
interesting. Yeah.
Because in order to, like, let's say you see somebody walking down the street, there needs to be a biological trigger as
Right.
well as an emotional trigger to really make you
Oh,
react to somebody and resist another human being. Because if you really apply rationality, and the beauty of humans is that we've evolved to be rational thinkers, we're supposed to be using the mind, right?
wow.
You recognize that, okay, we both want the same things, we both can die the same way, we
Mm,
both, like more or less, it's more than skin, I mean, like, we all have the same skeletal system at the end of the day,
mm,
right? So your rationality would just recognize that as another human being, but there is stored, I believe, triggers that are actually
biologically.
probably, yeah, biologically, that actually cause
Wow.
more harm than just learning racism.
That makes sense, because it's sort of like, would you compare it to the same thing of you see someone, a dude walking down the street, and he may not be the most attractive dude, but for some reason you're physically attracted to him?
Yeah.
Would you say that that's the same kind of biological unconscious trigger?
Yeah, that could be energetic as well,
Yeah.
right? Magnetism, like he's
Yeah.
exuding some type of energy that's just like magnetic. You can't explain it, but you're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like there's something about you and I could totally date you or something.
Yeah, okay. By the way, guys, we are not excusing or trying to undermine racism. We're just looking at it from a different angle, which we are
Mhm.
very much allowed to do. Um, and yeah, this is a place to ask controversial questions in a safe space. So please don't get mad at either one of us in the comment section,
Mhm.
because I know there are a lot of snowflakes out there. Oh dear. Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. I never thought of, I guess, that being such a biological trigger.
Mhm.
Um, Back to, I guess, the topic of today's conversation, it kind of does intertwine to what we were talking about, but
Yeah.
getting back on track, what was your spiritual journey like? And how did you encounter like your connection to yoga and Indian spiritual practices, Ayurvedic medicine, Hinduism, or
Mhm.
anything like that? What
Yeah.
was your journey with that?
Yeah. So for that, so growing up, I was always a very rational thinking kid. Like I
Mhm.
was super intellectual.
Nice.
But what people always saw was the athletic side. So for a long time, I
Right.
was even though I had this very rational thinking mind, people were always like, no, she's the athlete. She's going to go on and play sports.
You
You know,
played
I had two,
soccer, right?
yes,
So
exactly.
cool. You were actually the girl from Bend It Like Beckham.
I wish she actually went somewhere with it. I did not. But
Would you have?
I think what's the incident with my knees, I think ended up being more emotional trauma than physical trauma. So
Right.
that being stuck in that emotion of I can't do this again is actually what
Mm,
stopped me from ever
yeah.
going further.
That stops a
But
lot
I,
of people. Fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah.
It's
And
hard.
I, yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah, and
would,
I do.
oh, sorry. Oh my God, we keep, I was just gonna say I wouldn't know what I would have done if I couldn't stop, if I had to stop dancing for an injury. Like that would
Mhm,
be so traumatic. Yeah. Sorry, continue.
mhm. Yeah, we're all like, okay, so Adia's in Australia, I'm in Canada. So I wonder if that's the reason why,
Yeah,
but
I
it's
think
like,
it's a
yeah,
bit
like it's just like, oh.
choppy. Yeah.
But yeah, so I had that accident. I wanted to be a high performance soccer player. I had this image that this was going to be me. I think part of
Wow.
it was because people saw it and I affirmed it and I got that, oh my God, they're looking at me, they're watching me, my dad
Yeah.
growing up, his father wanted him to be an athlete and he never did it. Now here's his chance to have his child do it. So
Mm.
it was a big deal. And I sustained a pretty bad knee injury where it just broke me completely. I didn't want to move emotionally. I had an identity crisis at like 16, which makes no
Wow.
sense. But for me, it was the end of the world. And I really thought that I couldn't do anything with my life after that.
Wow.
Yeah. And what happened was, I was able to reconnect with my mind because that's a very powerful faculty within my whole constitution.
Mm.
And by constitution, I think of this three-part system, which is the mind, the body, and the soul. So for you,
Yeah.
Adi, I can imagine you're very connected to your body,
Yes. Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which definitely, if like I've seen you dance on Instagram, and I'm
Oh.
just like, wow. Um,
Thanks.
but for me, like I was able to connect with my mind, and that somehow got me to connect back with my body. So there
Mm.
was a mental willpower to just reconnect with this again. And I tried to play the sport again, but the fear was always there. Like, what if I hurt myself again? What if I fall and collapse? And, people see that happen because that's what happened to me. I literally fell and couldn't move. And yoga was the only thing that got me moving again. And part of the reason why I did it was because I just, as a South Asian, felt that I could identify with it because it was a South Asian practice.
Mm.
Yeah. And the
That's
biggest part of
awesome.
Yeah, and the biggest part of yoga was the breath part of it, syncing the movement with the breathing, because otherwise I could be hysterical, like not being able to move, or I could freak out and I could feel myself going into more of a fight or flight mode.
Right.
And I could always bring myself back to rest by just breathing properly. So yoga is probably like it was a huge part of my life. Like it changed everything. I mean, I went on to get a certification in it.
Wow.
But the interesting thing is when I learned yoga, I never learned it from social. I mean, at the time there wasn't social media really, but I never learned it from the internet. I never learned it from going into studios. I really just learned it by looking at like, like, so every brown kid can relate to this. On weekends, early in the mornings, there are these like South Asian programs that your grandparents or parents watch.
Yes, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
they had like Ayurvedic segments with these old
Really?
men. Yeah, and they would
That's
do
so
yoga.
awesome.
Yeah, and before my parents would
We
switch the
didn't have
channel,
that.
we we
We
had
did
everything.
some classes, like they were boring though.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you guys didn't have Ayurvedic teachers teaching yoga at all?
Oh well, I'm
Really?
Sri Lankan, so
Ah,
we did like Dhamma classes, and
yes.
the boring one I was talking about is the one that you typically go to the temple Sunday morning, you do Dhamma
Mhm.
class, and it's just really boring. Like you want to just blow your brains out. But then I had a better Dhamma class, so I shouldn't talk badly about Dhamma classes because the other one I went to was actually phenomenal, and I'm yet to have my Dhamma teacher come on this podcast. So
No, but it's a hard
yeah.
dance. It's not an easy dance to do.
No, Dhamma, like Buddhism teaching.
Oh, I thought it was like
Yeah.
the
No,
stomach or
no, no.
like, oh, okay.
Oh no, 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 no. No.
What is she saying? That's hard.
Yeah. It's like Dhamma means the teachings of the Buddha.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry,
I'm
yeah.
curious to
See,
hear more
it's
about that
funny
now.
because like we're both South Asian, but because you're
Yeah.
Indian and I'm Sri Lankan, there are still like so many
The
differences.
difference is,
And it's
yeah.
funny because like I feel like you can really relate to another South Asian, but like the differences don't feel
There's a
that
difference.
far, but there is a
Mhm.
difference. Yeah.
Yeah. Which just speaks to like the awesomeness of India as a nation in a way, because you have
Yeah.
so much diversity
Yeah,
within
exactly.
South
Yeah.
Asians, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which
Continue.
is
Sorry.
which is like a whole different topic on its own, right?
Yeah.
Kathik. I was thinking of Kathik actually. Do you know Kathik where they okay, look it up. I think you'll like
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Um, but
Good.
because Dhammik is nothing in the way I'm saying it. So
Okay.
but yeah, and so it just yoga just allowed me to connect to my mind and body, and the way I learned it was watching those shows. So
Nice.
seeing these old hairy men doing yoga, and I was like, okay, so that's how you do it. And so for a very long time I never went to a studio. I actually didn't go into a studio until like consistently until I was doing YTT training.
Right.
And that's when I saw a huge difference between how they teach yoga in the West versus how you're
Wow.
supposed to do yoga, because
I
yoga is
wanted to ask that.
yeah, it's a lifestyle. It's not a fitness at all,
Yes.
right? And so I
Okay.
was completely thrown off. I was thrown off by the clothes people were wearing. I was thrown off by like the what they think of as tantric, but that's not very tantric, you
Yeah.
know? And even when I, as someone who can teach, I just didn't want to teach in a studio. I was like, that's not the yoga I can teach.
Right.
And a huge disclaimer here is there's nothing wrong with the way that they're doing it, actually.
Okay.
And we can go into appropriation and all that kind of
Yes,
stuff,
I was gonna ask.
because they don't know the culture the way I do, right? As a
Right.
South Asian, I have VIP insider information,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so um, yeah, it's yoga was the one thing that really activated something in me. And I think a big part of the reason why I'm also into health is because of yoga, because I value
Wow.
the body so much more.
That's so beautiful. That's
Mhm.
awesome. I wanted to ask, there are a couple things to unpack there, but let's start with what are the most, I guess, the biggest differences between the way you learnt yoga and then yoga in the West? And
Mhm.
can we just go through some like common misconceptions, like differences between like how yoga should really be compared to what they're doing, or but we won't
Yeah.
talk about whether it's right or wrong yet. We'll just
Mhm.
say the differences.
Sure. So yoga is a lifestyle. It's a sister science of Ayurveda, right?
Right.
And
Okay.
the whole point of yoga is to really connect the mind and the body into one,
Right.
right? And the way that you do that is by breathing and by focusing on your body. So you do very slow movements, actually is probably the best way to do yoga, I would say. The way that it tends to be taught is in a fitness sort of regimen, and it's very highly categorized. So you have hatha, you have yin, you have kundalini, which is nothing, there's nothing wrong with that. If anything, I think it allows you to learn more critical aspects. But for me, especially when I teach it privately, I want my student, which I even think is a weird name to give to somebody, but I want my client, actually is a better word, to embody the practice and create their own flow out of it every single day. And that's how it should be, because it's almost like a language you're speaking. It's you're wielding or molding your mind, or actually intertwining your mind and your body together through a physical movement.
Gotcha.
Right? And it's not taught like that in studios. And for some people, they need the instruction. For some people, that's all they want is the instruction. But if you really want to get the crux and the benefits of yoga, I highly recommend that you do it at home. Take a few classes and then go and embody it yourself.
And just kind of flow from each random movement to the next. Like, don't have a strict way of doing it.
No, exactly. Because
that literally, I'm so happy that you said that, because I can't do yoga classes anymore. They're just so formulaic, and it's just the same thing over and over again. Oh, I can't. It's boring for me. I'm like, I just want to let my body do what it wants to do on that specific day, because you're different every day and your body has different inclinations every day.
Yeah, exactly what you said is the reason why you should do it for yourself more than going into a studio, is because, you know, my hips are built completely differently than the teacher. And so when she's trying to, you know, I mean, inclusivity is a big thing that's happening in yoga right now. So this idea of consent and all that. But you still have teachers who will tell you you're doing it wrong, but you're not actually doing it wrong. Your physiology is not allowing you to go a certain point.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So I just think it's important that when you practice yoga, see how you're off, because you won't know that in a class. You won't realize that. You'll just think you're doing something wrong. Yeah.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah. And to answer the latter part of your question, I guess, how is it being done wrong? There's like a host of different ways, I suppose you could look at that. But definitely one is if you're someone who prefers to have the statues, so Shivji, Lakshmi, you know, all these South Asian gods, first of all, you have to know what they mean and what they represent. I've gone into so many studios and asked this question of like, oh, who is this? Just for fun. Yeah. And nobody can explain to me who it is.
Oh my gosh.
It's a common thing. It's just because a statue looks super cool that people will have them in their studios.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's important not to keep them on the floor. It's important to dust them. It's important to, for some culture, I think more for like what it would be for Hindus, I believe they go into certain places, east, west, south. I'm not too familiar with that personally, but if that is the case, you should honor that for sure. Yeah. For me, being Sikh, I don't really use statues of the gods. I do like think about them and meditate on them, and I love the meaning of them. But it's a whole different thing if you're Sikh, of course, versus being like Hindu. But again, for people that are non-Hindus, I highly recommend that you do it. You hold them and you honor them the way that they're meant to be honored, because then admit to yourself you're just appropriating something because it looks nice.
Yes. Yeah. And then what about the mispronunciation of words? Because I know that's a huge thing amongst white yoga teachers. And, you know, I can understand personally, my opinion is that I can understand just a regular person going to yoga class and then mispronouncing a word versus the teacher that has dedicated a lifestyle towards yoga. They call themselves a yoga instructor. They've done training and they've kind of like dedicated like a big chunk of their life towards devoting to yoga and still not being able to pronounce the word. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Okay. So we're opening Pandora's box now. Yes. So I believe that all yoga should be in Sanskrit.
Okay. And yes. Me too.
Yeah. And
I'm like cat cow. What?
Yeah. It's that, and it's God.
Yeah.
And the reason being is again, remember, yoga is a science. And so
Yes.
Sanskrit is a very powerful language. It was intentionally designed for vibration. When
Mm.
you're pronouncing the words, you're creating a vibration,
Mm-hmm.
right? Cat
Yeah.
cow means nothing. Downward dog means nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Camel means nothing.
That's right.
Um, you know what I mean? But when you say it in Sanskrit, there is
Yeah.
a power that is emitted. It's like when we sit in the beginning of class and we say Om, right?
Mm.
It's that vibration when everybody does it for those few seconds is pretty powerful, right?
Yes. Yeah.
um and it's not hard to learn how to speak Sanskrit. It's really not that hard,
Mm.
right? If you can say French words and Italian words, you can definitely say Sanskrit. Yes,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
longer, it's more syllables, it requires your brain to really focus, but
But
you
it's
can do it.
worth it. And it's worth it.
100%,
That's what
100%.
people don't get. It's
Hmm.
actually good for you. You're not doing it even just for us, for the South Asians to feel
No,
appreciated. It's actually even more so for you because to get the full experience,
100%.
proper yoga and the
Hmm.
vibrations that you're getting through that.
Exactly, because if you're a
Mm-hmm.
teacher of yoga, you want to be doing it right
Mm-hmm.
for yourself, especially, right?
Yes, yeah.
And there's this fear in the community of actually saying those words. And the other thing I would also say is I think students should come in hearing those words. I don't think we should
Yeah.
be dumbing it down, because that's what we're doing. We're dumbing yoga down, a
Mhm.
very powerful system, just so students are comfortable because they don't understand different Sanskrit words,
Mhm. Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And like asana is the only Sanskrit I tend to hear, to be honest with you,
Yes, yeah.
or chakra or
Or
something,
vinyasa,
right?
yeah.
Or vinyasa, right?
Yeah.
But like encourage students to like start embracing those words. I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely do, and I find that they
Yeah.
love it. They really love knowing the Sanskrit.
Yes, exactly. And I also think some people are embarrassed of like saying it wrong and they maybe it's worse if you say it the wrong way. But I think we
No,
really appreciate trying and like um yeah, embarrass yourself a little bit, but we're open to telling you the proper way if you ask a South Asian person. I think
yeah.
most people would be very open to like teaching you properly how to say it.
Oh, 100%. I would never like it's like if I go to France and I speak French and I sound like horrible. My French accent is awful,
Yeah.
but no one's going to be like, oh, we're going to belittle her because she's not
Yeah.
saying it properly. People are drawn to that. They're like, oh my god, do you have an interest? Like, let me help you, let me
Yeah.
support you, like, what do you. So it's the same thing with Sanskrit. Like, to yoga teachers listening, pronounce the words because it benefits you, actually, if anything
Yes.
else.
That's actually very true. Okay, let's talk about what you believe cultural appropriation. Let's kind of define it a little bit first, and then we'll talk about, is it morally impermissible and
Yeah.
where the line is between appreciation and appropriation and how that comes into yoga. So,
Hmm.
do you know, like, could you explain what cultural appropriation is and if you have any idea how it like kind of came to be, how yoga came into the Western world, if you know that?
I know a little bit about it. I can definitely go into the history of how appropriation started. It's a
Okay,
very
yes,
dense
yeah.
history, but essentially, appropriation is when you take something from another culture or region and you misrepresent it in your own domain or space.
Gotcha.
And it can be done in the name of income to make money. It could be done for like a whole different host of different reasons.
Yeah,
But essentially, appropriation is just taking something and distorting it
got it.
and removing it from its origin completely.
Okay.
And so, sorry, Adi, remind me of the second part of your question.
Oh, yes. So yeah, how did appropriation come to be and how was,
Yes.
yoga introduced to the Western world? Yeah.
Yeah. So appropriation started to happen, if I look at the years that I'm quite familiar with, is a little bit before colonialism. You had in a lot of noble classes this popularity of travel writing.
Okay.
And you would have these stories circulating about, people going to Africa, to the east, and bringing back all these
Um,
trinkets and all this stuff. Remember, there were merchants that were constantly trading in different trading posts between east and west.
yes.
And more often than not, most of these people that were writing about travel never left their homes. It was all made up,
Right.
right? And so they would have these objects and these, like, you know, like the stone elephant or whatever, but there would be a
Right.
lot of this misinformation around it.
Oh,
So that is probably the earliest. It could be even earlier than that, to be honest with you, of appropriation, but that's just one example.
wow. That's
Yeah,
incredible. I didn't know
yeah,
that. Wow,
yeah.
that
You
blew
can
my
trace it to the
mind.
medieval era. Yeah.
Wow.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah. And then you have, of course, with colonialism and more like international connections, foreign animals being brought in, emissaries bringing different objects and what have you, and people showing those off. And the problem is when you don't understand a culture, you will create any meaning behind whatever the object or idea
Yeah.
is that you have,
Yeah.
right? And so I guess my take on appropriation is that, especially looking at how today we are a very global community, is
Mm.
I don't think it's avoidable. I think it's one of those things that is here to stay and you can't stop it.
Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
Especially with the world becoming more, I guess, multicultural and
Exactly.
people having more mixed race children, and interracial relationships. And it's sort of it's sort of naive, I guess, to try and be so traditionalist and purist about our cultures and try and like
Yeah.
really like hold them so close and not share. There's such a line, of course, between like sharing and someone just fully taking something. But do you think yoga falls into the appreciation or appropriation category? And how did it come about? If you do you know how it came about into Western culture?
There's a few things I've heard of. One is that during, I think it was the late 1800s, there was a woman who was Irish. She went to India, she learned all the moves, she was a dancer, and she brought
Mhm.
it back. And that's where you get the names like cat cow, downward dog, and all that.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's that. Another is also you had these really big yogis
Mhm.
who went to from India, where they felt that they weren't being valued.
Mm.
Essentially, that's the case. They went to the US and they found immense success with the celebrities in the 40s,
Yes,
50s, and
that's right.
60s. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because if you listen to the interview of a lot of these yogis, the one thing they say is they regret bringing it to the West.
Wow.
But yeah, so it's probably there's probably way more examples than that, but those are
Yes.
definitely two really common ones that
Yes.
explain yoga. And yoga is appropriated, it's highly
Okay.
appropriated,
Yeah.
right? But again, I don't think that it can be avoided.
Okay.
I think that there are solutions for,
Okay.
anybody who feels like their culture is appropriated that they can take, but
What
appropriation is definitely not avoidable.
what are the solutions? I'd be really keen to hear that. I've never heard
It's
anyone talk about
it's
solutions and appropriation in the same sentence.
it's
Revolutionary.
so well, it's so simple, and it doesn't happen in the way enough that it should, and there's a reason why it doesn't happen. It's essentially, as a brown person, I should be investing in brown Ayurvedic practitioners and brown yogis. I should be going into the classes of South Asian people. I should be buying South Asian products from South Asian people.
Right.
um, it's as simple as that, because I really do believe money is such a powerful energetic force, and
Mm-hmm.
I vote with my dollar. And
Yes.
you know Gandhi was the first one to say that if you want to control the Western man, you control him through money,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
You control him at his belt or his
Mm-hmm.
wallet. And so that's always stuck with me personally.
Yes.
And I think that it's so important that we, as Black, Indigenous people of color, actually support people in our community doing our work. But I don't
Gotcha.
see that. That's the interesting thing. I
Really?
see, if anything, I see colored people go more towards white people doing their stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think,
Wow.
hmm and I think it's so important that we start investing in our people and bringing them up,
Gotcha.
because we have
Yeah.
the platform. So many of us do.
Yeah.
We need to start using it more, not being afraid to use it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That makes sense. But I understand that solution. I think it's a great solution, but I can hear people, like other people, start saying, yeah, but what about the white people? Like they're still appropriating it in their world. What can we do about that? Is there anything that we can do about that?
You can't do anything about it. And here's why, and I hope this doesn't get too controversial. But essentially, remember, let's go back to community, right? A white
Yeah.
person's going to feel way more comfortable with a white person teaching yoga because it's someone they recognize physically. It's someone that they feel comfortable with compared
Yes.
to somebody who is a person of color, who's saying it in Sanskrit, who is playing the South Asian music
Yeah.
in their yoga class. There is a disconnect that does
Yes.
happen that I've seen
And that's
within the
not
community.
racism, right? Would that just come down to tribalism again?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's not racism. That's just an understanding of, okay, you feel safer here to
Yeah.
learn it from this person. So who am I to say it's wrong? Who
Mm,
am I to block you from that experience?
yeah.
You know, and who am I to even want to invest the energy to fight for that when I can go
Gotcha.
and support my own South Asian? And I have like amazing friends who are not South Asian who teach yoga and
Mhm.
who do it in such a good way. And some of them
Mhm.
do it in a way that I would disagree with. But at the end of the day, you know, it's up to me to make my own choices and if I want to be an activist against appropriation, I'm going to do it with voting with my dollar at the end of the day.
Mm, that's so
Yeah.
powerful. I don't know
Mhm.
why I haven't heard that before, but I
I'm
just feel like, sure,
surprised.
like obviously. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, I'm just looking through my questions because I had some juicy ones. Um,
More controversial ones.
oh, okay. Yeah, actually, this kind of ties in with what we just talked about. How can we move forward instead of living in the past and playing the blame game?
Mhm. Yeah. It's, right now, all the change that people want to see, they're doing it within the space of the collective. But the problem is the collective haven't healed their own pain and their own trauma. And
Mhm.
you can't create change in masses if individuals are still hurting or they still have
Mm.
their traumas, essentially. So I think
Wow.
that if we as colored people, really anybody, honestly,
Mm.
wants to move forward, you have to start within. You have to heal yourself. You have to take a look at yourself and say, what's holding me back? What do I want to change? Where could I be better? Do it from the individual level, and
That makes
then change will
sense.
start to happen. Because there's a reason why certain communities are still impoverished decades later. There's a reason why
Yes.
the same traumas get perpetuated generation after generation, is because we're trying to do it at the collective because we think that gives us power, but that
Mm.
doesn't give us power. It's always at the individual before
Mm.
the collective.
That's so powerful. And this, again, it ties into generational trauma, which is my next question. Is the
Mhm.
perceived appropriation merely just a symptom of generational trauma carried from colonialism, the feeling of our culture being stripped away from us and ferociously trying to protect and preserve it? So is it
I would
more
say
of an
so.
emotional thing for us, really?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that our culture was being stripped away from us because it was the people of that time that felt that.
Yes.
And I can never relate to what it's like for someone to strip my culture away, because to me, I
Yeah.
feel like I have the power to reclaim it, if anything, right now.
Yes. Yeah, for
Right.
sure. Yeah.
I think it more just has to do with, if we're talking about generational trauma, which it definitely is.
Mm,
And it's only gotten more and more layered with other issues that South Asians or anybody has experienced down their family line.
yes.
But I think it's triggers.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So the greatest example is, and I know you can relate to this, is you're saying something, and the first thing is the person just wants to resist it. They don't want to hear
Yes.
it. They don't want to argue. They just want to keep repeating the same stuff
Yeah.
over and over again. And then they'll throw in your gaslighting, because that's the one thing I always hear all
Yeah.
the time.
Uh,
And yeah, and that's a great example of someone just living in that trigger
yeah.
versus being someone who can sit
Gotcha.
back and listen to everything and be like, okay, I see, like I can still disagree with you, but I
Yeah.
at least I understand what you're saying so much better.
Mm,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, that's pretty profound. You're spitting
Hmm.
some facts out here. I love this. Um, yeah. Wait. Okay, I'm going to give you some scenarios. What are your thoughts on Westerners wearing Indian traditional dress?
Hmm. Okay, so I think a part of me kind of likes it. I think it's really cute.
Okay.
Um, a part of me also gets triggered by it, I'll be honest.
Yes.
Because I'll be like, there was a time when it was shamed. There was a time
Yes.
when people were killed for it. There was a
Yeah.
time when people were belittled for it.
Mhm.
And now all of a sudden it's this normal thing to see them wearing it, right?
Yeah.
But I always think of what Nietzsche said, and I'm someone who's read Nietzsche, so I quote him appropriately, which is, an object, like you can give an object any meaning you want at the end of the day,
Mhm.
and you can also remove that meaning from it.
Mm,
So I like to think that the clothing is such a big part of a cultural identity, and I
yes.
choose to not create some form of dis-ease within myself, because I'm not hurting them by getting stressed, I'm hurting
Yes.
myself just
Yeah.
because they're
Exactly.
wearing my ancestral clothing. And I
Yeah.
choose not to hold on to the anger of my ancestors who
Mm,
were killed for that, because they are gone and I exist in the here and now, and
mm,
I can choose to thrive and be alive, and I can still wear those clothes, and
mm.
oftentimes they're not the latest fashion anyways, so
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. And that goes into my next question. This is a bit of a controversial one. So
Shoot.
trigger warning for anyone that's, listening. But if if we took more pride and ownership over our culture and its traditions, would appropriation emotionally affect us as much? An example of this would be Latin culture. I feel like Latin culture is like impenetrable in terms of appropriation, because even when people embrace Latin culture, they are so warm and accepting. But they already have that ownership of their culture, their strong like connection to their culture. Everyone knows what Latin food is, everyone knows what
Yep.
salsa is, everyone, same with like the martial arts. In Asian cultures, the way that's taught is like an Asian person will teach you most of the time. I know,
Mhm.
especially for Australia, if you go,
Yeah.
like it'll most of the time be an Asian person that owns a studio, or the white guy learned from an Asian person, and they know exactly like where it was from, the history behind it, and there's like so
Yeah.
much appreciation there. So what are the difference between cultures like that, like
Hmm.
Latin culture compared to our culture? And
Hmm.
like, yeah.
I think it's knowing your values and knowing who you are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's so much about embracing South Asian culture to feel more proud and less aggressive or less triggered.
Yes.
I think it's really being like, okay, I actually believe in this. I actually embody this. I
Yeah.
actually practice this, because I mean, the way that I look at it is, if I really believe in something, I wouldn't be fighting for it
Mm,
from a place of scarcity.
do you think it's like the jealous girlfriend situation?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's sort of like, if you are a strong and confident woman, even if
Mhm.
another girl's flirting with your man, you have no worries, because
Yeah.
you have so much faith and, I guess, confidence in within yourself, that you
Yeah.
don't feel insecure about the external things. And so is that sort of parallel to what's culturally going on right now with appropriation?
Exactly. I think that people are having identity crises I mean, like the example you gave was perfect, right? Because, when you're in that kind of relationship, like you like that your guy's being checked out. You're like, oh, wow, cool. Like, this is amazing, right? Like, I don't. And it's the same thing with your culture, right? You're like, wow, people are really into my culture. People are really like passionate about it. And I can see that because I love it too,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And you're not trying to attack a person, you're not trying to harm a person, because to want to exact that kind of vibration requires you
Mm,
to create so much dis-ease. And I would go as far to say that people are just addicted to stress hormones at that point, and
mm,
they enjoy the stimulus whether they realize it or not of that trigger,
mm.
right?
Yes.
And like I said, like if you want to really fight for something and change something, change yourself. But when you change yourself, you'll realize all of that pretty fast,
That
that
makes
there's
sense.
yeah, there's no reason to fight. The culture is so much bigger. The culture has been around for thousands of years. It doesn't need you to fight for it, it just needs you to
Mm.
embody it. That's it. Like,
Wow.
it doesn't, like, I think that's something that our community really needs to realize. And I'll use
Wow.
myself as an example. I'm South Asian, you know. I don't go to the temple. I'm Sikh, so I don't go to the temple, but I mean, I can very poorly read the script.
Mhm.
I can speak Punjabi pretty well, but I don't pray regularly like I should, like the way my cousins do, for example. So they would think I'm less of a Sikh. Now, am I attacking them for thinking that? No, totally not. I love
Yeah.
the story of our gurus.
Mm-hmm.
I love the origin of the story. Do I like the way that Sikhism is handled now? No, not at all. So I choose not to identify with modern Sikhism. I identify with Sikhism
Wow.
600 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, now there will be people that are like, well, then she's not Sikh. But then, and again, like, I'm not here to fight for it. I just know what I love and what I know, and I just go with that, and that's it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
Yeah.
if we were, I think this also comes back down to cultural identity, and back to the girlfriend, the jealous girlfriend kind of concept. I felt that when I was a little less, I guess, back when I was a bit more whitewashed and really felt opposed towards my culture, that
Mhm.
was when I really felt strongly about cultural appropriation. I felt that, I felt highly triggered about things, which is interesting because that
Yeah.
was when I was the least connected towards my culture. But
Mhm.
now that I'm like, I guess, embracing my culture more, I feel less and less insecure when I see something culturally appropriated,
Mhm.
which is interesting. And
Which is exactly that. Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, I don't mean to like, I hope that none of you listening to this think that we're just blaming cultural appropriation on South Asians and that we're just complaining and making a big deal about something that's not a big deal. I mean, it is a big deal, but at some level, it is also actually just uh us being triggered, and it's
Mhm.
something within us. Like, it doesn't affect really the rest of the world. It affects a culture that's um it's hurting only us, the culture
Yeah.
that whatever that thing is appropriated from. But at some level, we need to, I guess, learn when do we move on, because being constantly emotionally triggered isn't healthy for you as an individual.
Yeah.
So how are you going to move on from and grow,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, like this is something that I think everybody needs to wrap their head around. It's a new phenomenon for people to in the South Asian community to fight for South Asia and South
Mm.
Asian identity the way they are. This is a new phenomenon.
And it's great.
Historic it's great, but it's not right, because
Right,
historically
okay.
India was always open to other interpretation. It was always open to foreigners. It was always
Okay.
open to people coming in, taking information, and then us learning from them as well. So for the thousands of years that India, even before India bought it, has existed,
Mm.
it was always a country that was very almost, yeah, it was open to the exchange of knowledge and for people
Mm.
to take parts of it, because it was a sign of like, wow, like,
Growth.
you want to learn from me, you want to take this
Yeah.
home, like, take the wisdom, like, go run off, child.
Wow.
Like, so it's a very new phenomenon that obviously is coming from colonialism, because that's we've been conquered so many times, but somehow
Yes.
colonialism is the thing that made us poor, right?
Yes.
So
Oh,
obviously, yeah, it's
I didn't
obviously
know
oh yeah, we were known. So there's this word called booty economy, which is nations going into India and
that.
constantly stripping it of its wealth. But the country was so rich that it was able to sustain itself for hundreds of years.
Wow.
It's when colonialism came in, so
Mhm.
the British came in, that they really did damage, and they did damage on the economic level,
Right.
right? So in order for us, we kind of have to remember our roots, that we were a people that were very open-minded and excited for people to
Mm.
play with our stuff. And because we always knew what we valued, and we always knew what the right thing was. And
Mm.
the thing is, like, there's so much disparity within the South Asian community. Like, when I see South Asians attack other South Asians
Yeah.
on
Oh, well,
the
it's the
subject,
worst.
it's like, no, you're attacking the wrong person.
Mm.
So we need to come together more as a community and really kind of recognize that our past was one of openness and
Yes.
discussion and debates, not
Wow.
the social justice thing, that the quote unquote social justice
Oh,
thing that we're seeing.
yeah.
It's,
I
yeah,
absolutely can't. Yeah.
like, your
And
ancestors are shaking their head, to be honest with you.
sorry?
Like, your ancestors are shaking their head within
Yeah.
disappointment. Mhm.
100%. Yeah. Um, Also with colonialism, again, back when I was a bit less connected to my culture, a bit, I would describe myself as a bit, you know, wannabe woke, social justice warrior-esque. Um, I I really, you know, everything I could, you know, possibly think of, I would blame on colonialism. When it came to
Yes.
like our intracultural traumas, I'd be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, colonialism is to blame. It all stemmed from there. All the problems within our culture stem from there. And whilst that might be true, in
Mm-hmm.
recent times, I've really learnt that it kind of doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it is their fault. Like, but like, it doesn't matter to be keep questioning whose fault it is, who is to blame for this. Does it change anything now? And that's what I guess I'm really, you know, rewiring what brown paint means, because I think that I always wanted it to be a solutions based platform, and
Mm-hmm.
the only real way, I guess the biggest way, I'm not going to say the only way, the biggest way we can find solutions today is to look within ourselves and what can we do intraculturally right now to, I guess, change our state as a culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Do
agree
you
with
agree
you.
with that?
It's so easy to blame the past for the
Yeah.
problems of the present moment, but it's so easy to evolve past that,
Mm,
right? You know, if you're fighting for South Asian identity, then go back 200, 300 years and then start from there again. But nobody's doing
mm,
that, right?
no. Yeah.
Yeah. And colonialism, it's like it's I think part of the reason why it keeps getting perpetuated is because of academia, because you constantly have modern scholars focusing and regurgitating the same stuff in different words every time, which is
Right.
my beef with modern academia. Sorry, South Asian scholars. But like like we forget the rich, we focus on the colonial side of our history. We forget the rich history that's already been there from
Yeah.
the Maurya dynasty, from the Mughals. There's so much history that's in India that, like, even when I talk about it, I get goosebumps because
Mm,
I choose to resonate with that India,
yes. Yeah.
right? Not the chaos that it is now. And it's so easy to get past that. We just have to look back on the tools that we created
Mhm.
ourselves, that the rest of the
Yeah.
world is using.
And do you think that that's also, you know, people, it's almost like people can't, or they really fight to move past that, or it's like they don't almost want to move past it. And maybe perhaps, I guess I know from my experience, that was a lot to do with my cultural identity. I don't know if you grew up feeling embarrassed of your culture, or, you know, feeling like you wanted to
Mhm.
whitewash yourself, or I just personally, when I look at, you know, where I'm from, Australia, and the South Asian diaspora that's here, I find that a lot of the kids are so, you know, they're trying to find every way possible not to be South Asian.
Yeah.
And so, like, does that come back to cultural identity? What are your opinions on that?
It comes back to definitely the shame. So again, another
Yeah,
trigger, the shame, the fear, the self-preservation. Like, I need to
yeah.
protect myself, so I need to be less brown and become more
Mm.
whatever, right?
Yeah, and how can people
Um,
overcome that? How can people
Self-development. That's it. That's
mm,
honestly the
and
core of
embracing
everything.
your culture, and embracing
Yeah.
your,
And
like, that spiritual connection to your culture?
yeah, like
Yeah.
even that, like, let's say that maybe it's not your time to feel more South Asian, right?
Mm.
A big part, like,
Yeah.
I always joke, I grew up with parents that are coconuts. They're super brown, but they're like coconuts,
Yeah.
right? And they waited for us to actually be like, hey, we're actually really interested in like this culture stuff,
Mm.
right? Now, I know not everybody gets that,
Yeah.
right? But like, I, for a very long time, I didn't identify as Sikh,
Mm.
right?
I wanted to talk about that too. Yes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't identify as that. Like, I love my food. I love my culture. I love my grandmother. I love when she put prayers on throughout the house in the morning.
Mhm.
I never resisted that. I was never embarrassed by it, but I just, for myself, could not see myself as a Sikh Punjabi person.
Gotcha.
It wasn't until a little bit later that I really started to see that. Now, does that make me, to me, I never saw that as a problem. I see it
Okay.
as more kind of like, that was in my season, and
Yeah, that
now
makes
I'm in the season
sense.
of taking. And I think that one of the beautiful things is that existing in the modern world is, when it comes to shaping who you are as a person,
Mhm.
you have the opportunity to define yourself not just based on being South Asian, but you
Mm,
could be South Asian Canadian, South Asian Australian.
yes.
You know, like I have a Mayan statue on my altar. I'm
Mm,
by no means South American. I understand the origin of it. I can explain it very well, but
yes.
there's it's the beauty, and this could be maybe a really good discussion. Have like, what does it like? What's the right way to appropriate? Which is another
Right.
controversial conversation all itself.
Yes. Yeah, let's do that.
There's a season for when, like, don't never force yourself to identify with the faith. Let
Mm,
yourself become born into it slowly. It could
yeah,
happen years later.
because
It
that's
could
your
happen.
journey, your own personal
Exactly.
journey. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's beautiful. That's a really beautiful way of looking at it. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I've just blanked. You said something before just then that I wanted to ask a question on.
Yeah.
Uh,
What did I say? This is when my fish memory kicks
oh,
in.
is so you know how you said that you identified more with the Sikh religion, how it was back, I think 600 years ago or something, versus the
Mm-hmm.
modern way it's portrayed.
Yeah.
How come? Yes, explain
How
that.
come? Yeah. So this will bring you a host of new controversies
Actually,
and
before you
potential
say that, what can you just explain, give a brief synopsis on what the religion is and how it is
yeah.
different to every other religion?
Yeah, so Sikhism is the youngest religion faith in the world. It's actually only been around
Oh,
for maybe 600, not even 700 years.
wow.
Yeah. And the idea of the religion is that there were six gurus. So these
Mhm.
gurus, and guru literally just means somebody who can see through the darkness, they can see the light,
Mhm.
right? So these are very intelligent people who just saw the potential of humans and the potentiality of life being a completely different thing. Because at that time in India, you constantly had conflict between Muslims and Hindus,
Mhm.
right? Actually, we still have conflict between Muslims and Hindus technically, but they saw that and they kind of wanted to create a faith that was not as religious, was service based, and was truly based on cultivating the individual. So think of like modern self
Wow.
development back then. That's literally
That's
what they were doing.
that's pretty
Yeah,
revolutionary.
it's pretty like I was in awe. I'm just like, wow, you guys were way ahead of your time.
Yeah.
But history always shows us these people, right? If you look
Mm.
back. So there was 10 of them. They each contributed something different. One gave the language. One gave this idea of charity. The last one, Guru Gobind Singh, was he kind of militarized the faith, and he did that because it was the only way to, or he made the faith into more of a religion because it was the only way to keep it alive. And
Yes,
he
yeah.
wanted himself to be the last one.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it would have been, the 30th guru, and like, how these things
Yeah.
go, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's the premise of Sikhism, essentially, this idea of you are your own master
Mhm.
and you're here to serve and you're here to take care of each other. And um, there are certain, I guess, at that time, they developed certain boundaries or a certain structure that you would follow. So if you were going to eat meat, you would kill it yourself because that's how you show respect to the animal. Um,
Right.
there was this non-violence idea, but violence at a certain point. So there were all these like codes that you would follow
Mhm.
that it was just a very revolutionary faith, essentially.
Right.
Yeah. So
Wow.
today, Sikhism is very much, it hasn't even, I always joke that if the gurus came back, they'd be very disappointed in the way Sikhism is, um, because it's very much become like this orthodox faith that's
Okay.
very much based on fear. This fear
Mm,
of like, if I don't do this, I'm going to go to hell or I'm going to have this happen to
wow.
me. And that was never it, because remember, this is a faith that's designed to cultivate the human potential,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there was no heaven and hell. There was none of this. They were trying to dismantle these sort of more strict beliefs that Hindus and Muslims had and create a faith that was much more for the individual to thrive. So
Right.
today, it's the opposite of that. And I've just never been able to identify it with it.
Right.
I haven't stepped in a temple since I was like, what, like I'm 28 now. So since I was like 14.
Mm,
Like I've chosen not to step into it because that's how much I don't believe in the modern side of the faith.
right.
Um, I prefer to look at what they did in the past and just bring that forward, like charity, compassion, service,
Yeah.
all that.
That's
Mhm.
beautiful. I mean, I totally agree with you. I grew up Buddhist. I know this is it
It's
isn't on
so
the same
interesting.
level.
Yeah.
I grew up Buddhist, and the Dhamma I learned from my really good teacher who's going to come on this podcast.
Yay.
He taught us the true Dhamma, like
Mhm.
from scratch, kind of stripped away the tradition and cultural elements from it and just taught us the pure Buddhist philosophies and ways of
Mhm.
life. And that has literally changed my life,
Mhm.
Um, that I believe is, if people knew the true Buddhism, if people taught that without all the extra like tradition and cultural muck that kind of like was layered onto it, it would be a totally different story. But it's sort of almost inevitable to happen. I guess just how we were talking about multiculturalism, the world,
Mhm.
that, religions also change, and it's almost like Chinese whispers. It just keeps, you know, becoming something that it isn't over time, naturally and
Mhm.
inevitably. But I don't know too much about Sikhism, so I don't
Mhm.
mean to like offend you by saying this, but
Yeah.
I just being careful. I've always, I guess the impression I got is that they're very conservative. And then so when
Mhm.
I saw you, I was like, whoa, you're Sikh? Like it just didn't.
Yeah.
Could, is Yeah, can you just explain how it became, or was it supposed to be conservative like that, or how did it really become
Yeah.
this? Yeah.
Yeah. So the Sikhs are, it's really funny because, yes, there's so many of them that are conservative, but there's so many of them that are very open minded and liberal. And I think
Oh.
that just go like if I showed you my parents and their crowd of like Sikhs, they
Hmm.
are all liberal. Their kids are dating, they're like multicultural like relationships.
Wow.
There is affairs, open affairs happening. There, I don't know if I should have said this
Wow.
actually, but there are open affairs happening, and these are people that are partying and celebrating, and it's
Wow.
that crowd. Then you have the very conservative Sikh that's very restrictive.
Ah.
Don't cut your hair, you know. Uh,
They're the
there's
ones that wear the turban
well,
thing?
even like the turban doesn't make you as conservative. The
Okay,
turban,
okay.
yeah, the turban and the beard doesn't make you conservative.
Right.
It's the way you take action in your life, right?
Okay.
And I think
Sorry for those who are listening. That was my very ignorant stereotyping right there. Sorry. Yeah,
no, but this
continue.
is a really good example of like you didn't offend me
Okay,
by
good.
saying that, right? Um, because I understand, like I get it. Like there are people in our community that wear the turban and they don't represent it,
Mm,
right? The way it should be
yeah,
represented, right?
yeah.
The way it was supposed to be represented if you choose to wear it. Um, so like example for the audience that you can have discussion and it's
Yes,
all
yeah,
okay. There's still
yeah,
peace.
yeah.
But I think it's like with any faith, to be honest with you, you have the people that are very liberal and open-minded and what have you, and then you have the more conservative crowd.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't say Sikhism is conservative. I find that it's very flamboyant and like, or Sikhs are very flamboyant and
Mm,
out there. But we definitely do have that crowd that are much more
yeah.
conservative. And I think the ones in Australia, they are definitely more conservative leaning. And
Yeah, that's
that could
probably
just
why I have
be,
that
yeah,
stereotype.
and that,
Yeah.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but like I do remember that there historically was a time when Sikhs were being killed in Australia from racism.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I remember hearing that
Wow.
because of the
I didn't know
immigration
that.
issue in Australia. And
I'm not going to say yes or no. I'm going to give you the benefit
I'm
of the
like,
doubt. I
okay, well, I'm
believe
gonna look this up
I have no
afterwards. I
idea.
might need fact
Yeah.
checking on this, but I just remember like there was something that was happening, and in Australia, Sikhs own a lot of land,
Yeah. Okay.
um, and so there was a bit of controversy. There were like Sikhs that were being like killed and stuff like that for wearing turbans and all that jazz. But it happens in Canada as well. It happens in
Okay.
BC. It happens in Alberta. So I think it's this stuff is not unique to just Sikhism. I think it happens often in a lot of faiths, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Cool. Sorry, I need to like I'm so not like a proper podcaster yet. I'm like full looking at the
No,
question.
you're doing great. You're doing great.
Um, I'll probably edit this part out, don't worry. uh, I think we've actually like gone through a lot of them.
I think so. I
One
think
thing
so.
that I would like to ask, I reckon we'll do two more questions. So one thing that I would like to ask, if there are any white yoga teachers listening to this now, or any white people that practice, I guess, Ayurvedic medicine or Tantra, or, you know, any of these types of commonly spiritually kind of appropriated things,
Yeah.
what advice would you give them?
Yeah. In the same way that if I was learning like some type of Western medicine
Mm-hmm.
or, something that's not South Asian, it's
Mm-hmm.
important to educate yourself. It's not enough to do 4 years of like Ayurvedic
Right,
medicine, whatever training, and think that you're suddenly a practitioner, right?
right,
The tricky thing about Ayurvedic medicine is that, like, my grandmother could have been an Ayurvedic doctor and she never went to school,
right.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
There is a lifestyle component to it that's really
yeah.
important
Yes.
to understand. Same thing with yoga, like educate yourself, actually learn the culture, actually feel the culture, go to the country if
It's
you
about
have to.
initiative, right? Initiative
Exactly. Yeah, don't just
and
go do the
intention.
certification. There has to be intention behind it, right?
Yeah.
I look at myself and I've studied a lot of European history and I've studied like Gaelic, Latin, like these are
Mm,
languages I had to know. And I always had the intention to study the culture and the
mm,
history of those languages because I can't know those languages. And
mhm.
I find that honestly, in the same way that a colored person will take so much initiative to learn everything, the same
Yes.
thing doesn't happen within the white community.
Gotcha.
So that's one thing that I think needs to start to happen.
Mhm.
And and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Let's also keep that in mind,
Yes.
right? But then it's our responsibility as colored people to know who to go to when we're seeking those tools and resources.
Yes. Yes. And like you said, money is how we
It's
vote.
powerful, people.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
I thought of a really good question actually. If
Yeah.
colonialism didn't exist, would
Mhm.
cultural appropriation be an issue? Because if you think about it, you can't really culturally appropriate white culture. Can you? Or can you? I'm
Unless
not
you
sure.
become very French or something, like,
Yeah, yeah.
but even
But
that's
then
not,
people would be calling it whitewashing. They'd be like, you're trying to be
yes.
white.
Yeah.
That's what they'd say.
I think if colonialism didn't exist, then there would be a whole different thing. Because remember, there were things before colonialism, right?
Mm,
Colonialism was for a short period of time. It wasn't a very long period of time,
yes.
right? I think that there's so many other different layers.
Yeah.
And appropriation, maybe colonialism was the catalyst for appropriation, but the expansion appropriation was globalization and immigration
Yes, that's
and
right.
people bringing their cultures to other nations that otherwise were
Yes.
not used to the smell of curry.
Yes.
I'm looking at you, Canada. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And what is that? What are the common um, what are the common misconceptions about Tantra?
Hmm. Yeah, so people tend to liken Tantra to, it's like sex, to
Yes, that's right.
orgasmic yoga.
Yeah,
So
I've heard that a lot.
so the powerful thing about sex is when two people come together, what can you create? You can create a child. And if
Mm.
you can create a child, you're essentially God, because God is supposed to be creation
Mm.
and the ultimate creation is life.
Wow.
So Tantra is utilizing that energy, that life force,
Yes.
right? And so this idea, I think that people tend to liken Tantra towards like candles and music, and it has nothing to do with that. The energy is literally created within.
Right.
So to all the yogis out there, like turning on a candle and a diffuser will not get you into a tantric mood. It's self-development and really feeling into your body, that ecstatic pleasure of being you. That's tantra.
Right, okay.
And
So
when you're with a, yeah,
it's just an embodied experience, I guess, really connecting with the
exactly.
body. That's all it is.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you bring two people into play, thinking of Kama Sutra now,
Yeah.
imagine how awesome that energy would be.
Yeah.
So that's what it is, like two people that really know each other and are coming to the table as whole people, not half, not relying on this person to fill them. I'm doing hand gestures and I realize
Yes.
no one on the podcast is
Yeah.
seeing that.
Oh no, but this is also going up on YouTube.
Okay,
That's
perfect.
fine.
But that is like, that is a creation when two whole people come together and
Gotcha.
create, it amplifies the tantric energy. So that's what tantra is actually supposed to be.
Okay. And it
And
doesn't have
sexual
to be
energy creates.
sexual.
No, we
Yeah.
understand it from the lens of sexual energy creating, because
Mm,
sexual is sex is creation,
yeah.
but it has nothing to do with the way that the West looks at it. It's marketed as this
Yeah.
like really sexy idea.
I mean,
It's
yeah, because
sexy.
sex sells.
It's exactly right. I mean, like I said, like it is a sexy thing, but at the same time, it's not like
It's not
that kind of
always.
sex. Yeah, it
Okay,
could be
got it.
always. Imagine
Sorry?
how exciting. Imagine if you felt orgasmic every single day because you love yourself so much and you see infinite potential. That is hot.
Would it be also right to compare it to, I don't know if you've ever been in a choir or been near a choir, but that kind of vibrational energy where, all the frequencies, everyone's
Mhm.
harmonizing and you can just feel the that vibration just like penetrate your bones. Would that
Mhm.
bodily experience, I guess, would you classify that's not sexual, but it's a
Mhm.
very visceral reaction? Would that also
Yeah.
kind of fall into
If
tantra?
you internalize it deeply and that becomes a part of your expression, then yes.
So
Yeah,
it's
because
about
it's
taking
something.
something in and then
Yeah.
creating something out of it energetically.
Yeah. Yeah,
Got
because tantra comes from within, right?
it.
It's like, think
Gotcha.
the example that you gave at the beginning, when you're walking down the street and you see that guy, he's
Mm.
probably got his like tantric energy flowing. Right?
Ah,
He's able to, he might not be conventionally attractive, but somehow
yeah.
you find something very attractive, and attraction is just energy, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
Hmm.
that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think I've changed lives by just saying
You
that.
really have. You really have. I'm so mind blown by like this entire podcast, to be honest. I'm
Mhm.
just there's so much more I want to ask you, but I am wary for time, and I know that I'm definitely going to have you on future episodes because you do have a wealth of knowledge on not only this topic, but so many other topics. One I definitely want to talk to you about is interracial dating, because I know you've been through your
Yes.
fair share of struggles, and so have I.
Yeah.
So we'll have to do plenty more podcast episodes, but thank you so much for
No,
being here today and agreeing to do this with me. I'm so honored.
no, I would do any chat with you, honestly. And
Oh,
thank you for even like creating a platform that has this kind of dialogue, because it takes courage. It takes
thanks.
a lot of trust in your own community, for better or worse.
Yeah.
So you're creating a platform that's going to create a ripple effect, and it's the dialogue that we need.
Yes.
It's the dialogue of the time. So thank you for creating this podcast and
Oh,
also giving me a platform to share what I know.
of course. Oh my gosh. Actually, I need to ask you, where can they follow you? How can they find you? And what services do you currently offer at the moment?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Simi Pannu Wellness, SIMIPANNU Wellness. My website is the exact same thing, www.simipannuwellness.com. And I work mostly on trauma coaching and nutrition. So all my programs incorporate those two together. And all my services are on my website. There's one-on-one consults, there's programs. And yeah, all my good stuff is on Instagram as well. So you can check me out there.
Awesome. And any future projects that we should look out for?
Well, speaking of Tantra, I guess, I will be launching sometime. The podcast will probably be out a little bit later, I'm guessing. But I do want to do more stuff based on creation. So, working with women that want to be moms and how you can heal your
Oh,
trauma
wow.
rather than passing it on, and doing that through coaching and nutrition.
Wow.
Yeah, and
That's
postpartum
phenomenal.
work as well. So stay tuned
Wow.
for those. Yeah.
That is so exciting. I think that wouldn't that just eradicate most of the world's issues if
I
every
hope
child
so.
was born in the best possible scenario emotionally to set them up for the best possible life?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that is
I
some
mean,
powerful stuff you're doing.
that's my goal. And I think that's the way that health has to move now is we need to bring more of
Yes.
that trauma-based healing
Yes.
and combining with nutrition so we can remove gut disease because you pass all that on to your child, right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
trauma is stored within the body, and most people don't know that.
Yeah.
So much
That's
to talk about.
the
Yeah.
pain body, right? That could be a whole different podcast
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah. 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 And we'll definitely have to do it. But thank you so much. And we'll see you in some upcoming episodes.
Thank you, babe. Wow.